Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. And on this week's episode, Aaron Gerke and Kevin Bender, the two of us are back, and we are going to start talking about Daniel. We're gonna chat about Daniel here for a couple of weeks, but it's not going to be specifically right in the text all the time. But we'll see where the conversation goes as we engage in this spiritual conversation. We hope that it's enlightening to you and encouraging you to do the same thing with your faith and your conversations as well. We hope you enjoy it. Well, hey there, Kevin.
Hey, buddy. Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. But I certainly enjoyed your conversation with Dawn. I found that to be encouraging and challenging and just kind of insightful. And it was just fun to listen to somebody else share their story. And so, thanks for bringing him in. And maybe for those of you listening and watching, we've got some plans to do more of that in the future as well, bringing in some other voices to this conversating. I don't know you can say conversating, but might as well.
Yeah, conversations.
Yeah.
In the words of Don Kuiper.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to be hitting the book of Daniel here for a while at St. Peter and Paul in our preaching. And, in general, that's kind of what we're doing with this podcast as well, is just sharing the story behind the story, seeing what was hitting. And I don't know, what's your initial read in Daniel been like, Kevin?
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron. I'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
Firstly, I appreciated, your sermon, just kind of setting the stage and giving us the context behind what's going on in the story. Honestly, one of the things that stuck with me was just the year, just the simple naming of a date.
Yeah.
Okay, so 605 BC, because that's important, because that's this is a date in history.
Right.
Sometimes this sounds goofy, but it's I forget, this is real history.
Yeah.
That happened. I mean, when you think about historical or historicists, a Bible is these are documents, right, that paint pictures of how history was lived in this part of the world.
Yes.
And so anyways, you just set the stage and kind of that you went all the way back in your sermon actually to I think 1250.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
The starting of the kingdom, and so you're moving those 600 years, and crazy to think about Israel's origins even before that, in time of the judges.
Yep.
And then they're we need a king because this is a bad situation. So just need to see this civilization kind of progress, and then kind of explode a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and so if you're listening and you're not all that familiar with the scriptural story or the scriptural narrative or how that happens, this is just a kind of a side note. One thing that's been really helpful for me and for a lot of people in our church, a couple of years back, we read through. It's called The Story. If you don't have a copy of it, you can find it online. The Story. If you come to our church, we have some free copies and you can pick one up. But the editors of that, or the publishers, Max Lucado and Randy Frazee, they took the Bible and put it in chronological order and made it look like a chapter book. So basically to show the overarching story of the scriptures from beginning to end. And what's really helpful about the story is it helps to put in place the kind of the timeline of when stuff is happening. Because if you just open up your Bible, that's one of the things that I still, and this is full disclosure as somebody who's seminary trained.
Plug your ears, Dale Meyer.
One of the things that I don't have totally memorized is when all of the all the prophets line up historically with the kings and which portion of Israel's history is happening when those prophets are speaking. So there's all those kinds of things, because you get even just in preparation for Daniel, it's just that reminder of okay, while Daniel is happening, Jeremiah is also in Jerusalem as the prophet who is speaking that Jerusalem is going to fall and is there for the fall of Jerusalem. But soon after Daniel is taken as captive, Ezekiel, the prophet, is taken in a second round of captivity to Babylon. So there's like just this short time span between 605 BC and when Jerusalem is destroyed in 587 BC. There's another round where Nebuchadnezzar comes and takes more captives, and Ezekiel's taken there. So like just putting all those pieces in place does exactly what you're saying. Like, okay, we've got books of history that tell of what's going on in Israel. Then there's the prophets that are happening at the same time, but the way the Bible is categorized is all the prophets are lined up right at the end of the Old Testament, and then you got to figure out which ones go with, First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles and all that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of just Bible stuff, but yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Aaron, especially because this is funny. I actually have been trying to, just for my own self, knowledge, piece together when I was trying to piece together my own chronology of Bible. I didn't realize this was right there in the story, which is like 10 feet from my office.
Yeah.
I could just grab one and all my work would be solved.
You should, because at the beginning of each chapter, they literally have a timeline. They put the timeline at the beginning of each chapter.
That's
saying,
awesome.
These things are happening here. So
yeah, and this is also something that stuck out to me. It wasn't necessarily like super emphasized in the sermon, but you did mention that Daniel, probably from like a wealthy family of maybe nobility, because these are kind of the guys that Nebuchadnezzar's going after in the beginning of the story, and that he was from the line of Judah.
Right.
And this, so like as an Israelite living in this time, or even I think following this time, when you read this, immediately this is like, beginning of the movie, like, oh gosh, we got problems here.
Because the Messiah is supposed to come through
from
that line.
This line. Yeah. And they're taken away.
Yeah.
Which was just, interesting to think of that and hear that at the beginning of this story, and also think about like just where we're at societally in our own land, which you did make that connection of, look, we woke up, all of us woke up a few days ago, watched the news, saw a lot of chaos, and it's kind of like you have that gut drop.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, these guys in Daniel's time, they were having that gut drop for sure.
Yeah.
At least all those who were holding on to the promise.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I was on vacation when all the stuff at the Capitol happened. I don't know if it's probably not worthwhile our time. I feel like we're probably too ill-informed, and it's too soon to totally know what's going on to, give some sort of
wise,
wisdom towards that. But, but just in practicality, I was on vacation when that happened. I think it was happening like in the middle of the day, and my kids were having rest time. And while they were resting, I was just watching Netflix, and Abby was taking a nap. And she woke up from her nap and said, "What happened in the world while I was sleeping?" Because she woke up and checked the news or something. And I said, "I don't know. I was watching Netflix." So I didn't wake up one day and saw things in turmoil. I came out of Netflix binge and saw that things were in turmoil. But yeah, but certainly, I just. I did mention in the sermon, like we've gone through books of the Old Testament,
right.
Kind of each year from Jonah to Job to Esther, and in particular with Esther's story last year, I find it's actually very similar to Daniel's story in a sort of way. She is also in Babylon when that's happening. Well, it's actually Persia, because by that point Persia has taken over the Babylonian Empire. But the thing I remember preaching time and time again with Esther is that the whole idea of the sovereignty of God.
What does that mean?
It means
sovereignty.
Sovereign, like just over and above, in control, powerful, in authority. So God is totally in control of all of the things happening in the world. And I don't know if you're listening, the place where this oftentimes goes, and I don't want to get too crazy deep, but we're going to have to just for a second. Sometimes what people will say is, okay, if God is sovereign and all powerful and all in control, then does that mean that he caused the events of the world and made every single little thing happen like pieces on the chessboard?
Sure.
You know, because that's what our human minds would think. We would go, okay, God's in control. And even like in the story of Daniel, he basically says like, I'm making this kind of stuff happen.
Right.
But also sort of allowing history to unfold in order for his plan to happen. So I had a professor say something to this effect, like God is 100% in control of all things. But you and I, as humans who live in this world, are 100% responsible for the decisions that we make and 100% accountable for the decisions that we make. So God does not move us around like pieces on the chessboard. We make those decisions. Like, I decided to wear these socks today. Like, God did not pick out my socks for me.
Sure.
My wife bought them for me. She made that choice. So those are pretty cool, right? I made the decision to wear a stained shirt. So I did all these things, right? God didn't make that for me. Yet God still knew that it was going to happen. Like, he was over and above all of those things. So he's sovereign, he's in control, he's in authority, but at the same time, you and I have to make our decisions in response to all of that stuff. So,
and when I think about that, actually, like, that paints a much more beautiful picture of God than the alternative.
what's the alternative?
So, like, the idea of the chessboard, you know,
Okay.
like, hey, Dad, let's play a board game tonight. Okay, you know, family, and we all sit down, but I move all the pieces.
Yeah.
You know, like, that sucks.
Yeah.
But God has this amazing. I mean, this is what blows me away when you think about humans. When I think about myself, how hard is it for someone to kind of to change me? You know, to someone to like make me a better person. You would think I would want that, but you know, I like my devices. I kind of like my habits. I get in a groove, and I don't want to be messed with. But that's kind of God's, like, that's his whole jam.
Yeah.
You know, is to take people and to grow them and make them into something new and different, something they never would have been on their own, right? And it seems like this is what he even is doing, like, through history. So, like, he's raising up the Babylonians to come in and take down Israel because, like you said, they needed this discipline. And that's a hard thing to hear.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And no one likes to be disciplined.
Right. And what we also need to remember as Christian people living on this side of the cross and the empty tomb is that prior to Christ, God was working out his plan through the nation of Israel. So when judgment needed to happen, or when God's wrath had to come because of sinfulness, it had to come on the nation of Israel. When God told Israel to do something, they needed to respond, or he would get angry. So on this side of the cross, all of that wrath of God was poured out on Jesus. So Jesus takes all that Israel was supposed to do and does it, and takes all the wrath that God needed to pour out on the people of Israel, and he has it poured out on himself. Expanding from the cross and the empty tomb, for us then, we are, as Paul talks, we're this new Israel. The church, the Christian church, is the new Israel. So on this side of the cross, God doesn't discipline us in the same way that he disciplined the nation of Israel. So we need to be careful when reading the Old Testament to say, well, you know, take America, for example. Sure. Is God disciplining America for its faithlessness to him? That's a hard question to answer. In one way, we could say God's desire for all people is to turn from their sinfulness and repent from that and turn to him. So he uses the world's events to try to make that happen. So it's not a discipline as it was for Israel, but it certainly is any world event, anything, natural disasters, anything that happens in the world is an opportunity that God will use in order to turn people from their sinfulness and turn them to Him. So
Yes.
that's, I mean,
And this too, this is bringing to mind to me, like, just to,
sorry, folks, we're
getting
if this is deep theology, so conversate with us. If you need to pause and go to the bathroom and get yourself some coffee, go ahead.
do it. But yeah, no, so two things come to mind as you're explaining that as well. One is going back to last week's episode, we're under the sun.
Okay.
It's not our job to try and climb above that line and say, this is what God is doing in this event, right? That's not our job.
Right.
We'll let God do what He does.
Yeah.
And we will look to where He speaks clearly to us as well in His Word.
Exactly.
Right. He makes Himself very clear in His Word about Jesus' atonement.
Yep.
For our sin, Him taking our sin upon Himself as Israel reduced to one person, Jesus, and also might be helpful to think too the difference between like punishment and discipline.
Right. And I always like to go to that place, and I think that'd be helpful for us. Because I always like to ask people that question, like when I say, if I say discipline, or as parents, you need to discipline your children. Is that a negative word or a positive word?
Sure. Yeah, because even if you think about like disciplines, like there are disciplines you learn and you kind of train and you want, like the discipline of working out, for instance. Obviously, clearly good things.
Yeah. So I just don't equate discipline with punishment.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I think sometimes there is punishment, but a loving parent, if we're using the parenting example, you have to teach your children through the punishment. Like I don't know, maybe this is just the way that we choose to parent, but I don't see the benefit of just straight up punishment without the education of instead of doing what you just did that was not good, please do this instead. It's not just no, don't do that. It's don't do that. Instead, do this, right? And so I think that's a helpful reminder to us. And I think that's truly what discipline is. It's not an abandonment. You don't just say, you did bad, get out of here and go away.
Right.
I'm frustrated with you. I'm disappointed in you. I don't like what you've done, but I love you so much that I'm going to show you a better way. Show you a better way. And so I believe that's when I read the whole scriptures, that's the way that God works with His creation.
Totally.
So a lot of people think that things like the Babylonian exile is God just saying, I'm done with you guys. If that were the case, then we wouldn't be here, like He wouldn't have worked through Daniel,
right.
And
this is the second point, I think, of this whole going into Daniel, right? You talked about three things. One was Daniel's faithfulness to God, and as an example for us as, hey, look, you can walk in this way even today. Like, this is relevant today.
Yeah.
And especially, man, when you start talking about the king coming out with the platter of food and the goblet of wine, I mean, just metaphorically, that for me was like, oh, how much does culture come and just on a platter say, look, this is what you need.
Oh, yeah.
This is what you want.
Yeah.
Have this,
Yeah.
And to have to have been raised up, Daniel, by his parents in the way he was to say no. That's huge.
Right.
But it's kind of our calling as well.
Right.
Like culture's they're gonna serve up a lot of stuff on platters, and you got to be careful about what you eat.
I know. And I was thinking about that, like as a parent of young kids who are, they're growing up faster than I would like them to, but I think like, holy smokes, like by 12, 13, 14, like I pray that I'm raising them well enough that they will know like that when the world offers them up all the wonderful things on the platter. Like, will they know what to say and when to say, no, that's not what God would have for me.
In that their identity.
Yeah.
And this is Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
I mean, smart guy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna kidnap a bunch of people, of course, change their names.
Yeah.
Like hit them at the core. Tell them what their identity is,
Yeah.
which is also what we see in the world. People finding their identity all over the place. And but yes, even though their names are changed, they're still living. They know who they are.
Yeah.
And that's really cool too.
Oh, absolutely.
But this all to come back around and say, God's faithfulness to us, this is how we kind of got in here, was God's relationship with his people, including you as a listener and me and Pastor Aaron.
Yeah.
Like God is faithful to his people. And that was your point number 2, right? If I remember correctly.
Was that number 2? I don't know. It was 2 or 3.
The order doesn't matter. But so God, because I felt this way. I have felt sometimes in my life like, oh, I blew it now. And now, my life is crumbling in this or that way, or I'm experiencing pain or hardship, and it must be God punishing me.
Yes.
And I think people relate to that.
I just had somebody tell me that yesterday, Pastor, I've got all this stuff going on in my life and in my family's life. Like, I don't know what I did wrong. I must have done something, I just tried to reassure, like, no, you didn't, you didn't. We know that from the scriptures, when the man's born blind and is healed, and the people ask, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind, and Jesus said neither, but that my works, might be demonstrated through him. And I think, and Paul talks about that in the way that we suffer. I think when we suffer well, we demonstrate to the world who this God is that we believe in. I mean, if you think about it, that's really modeling what Christ did. He suffered perfectly. I don't know. Is that? I've never even said it that way.
Yeah, and suffered unjustly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
for
he
sure.
was innocent.
Yeah.
Just kind of bore it. Yeah, and the witness that is to the world when you're not fighting, especially for your own life.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see that as Daniel unfolds with his own life, with Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, all these guys.
Bummer for those guys, man. Everyone knows them by their their Babylon names.
I know.
That's a rip.
I know. I was trying to memorize it myself. So we got Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So.
Dude, and it's kind of neat. Clever on Nebuchadnezzar's part too. So Mishael, right?
Yeah.
What is like God is, or
who is what God is?
Who is what God is? Yes. So Mishael becomes Meshach, which is the god Aku, Babylonian god.
Yeah.
But keeping basically his namesake and just saying, oh, who is like Aku?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting that those name changes. But I think they all give reverence to Babylonian gods.
Yes. Yeah. And in my sermon, I just didn't.
There's a lot.
There was a lot of detail.
A lot of Hebrew.
Yeah. So we just didn't go there, other than saying their names were changed. But I'm finding for myself. Well, you were trying to go through those 3 points that I said about why reading Daniel, and I remember the other one was, so it's Daniel's faithfulness to God, God's faithfulness to us. The other one is it demonstrates God's sovereignty over all nations and authorities, which we've already talked about.
Sure.
But I'm just finding for myself in my own walk of faith in this world, which seems to just get more and more turbulent, at least in the season that we're in. Daniel's season was very turbulent as well, and that was 2,600 years ago. So there are turbulent seasons in this world and in different parts of the world. But in our part of the world, it seems turbulent and chaotic right now. I find great peace in trusting that we have a sovereign God who is faithful to his promises and his people. and he just asks us to be faithful in return. I'm very content in that myself. I think some people will want to challenge that in the world, and I've had that challenge, like, and it always goes back to challenging God's sovereignty and saying, well, if your God is sovereign, then why is he allowing this to happen?
Yeah.
And I'm like, we got to work through all that stuff to come back to this place of he is working it all out, and one day he will return and he will make all things new. Right. And like, I'm totally at peace with his promise. Therefore, why would I not just remain steadfast in my faith? Like,
yeah, I was hoping actually to peel behind that just a little. Like,
okay.
When you say all he wants from us is just to be faithful, like, what does that look like? Like,
yeah, I think it's believing that he is who he says he is, that he is God, that he is our Savior, that the Spirit is alive and well in me, that I am forgiven and set free, and that I don't desire what the world has to offer me. I desire what he has to offer me, and I respond to him in thanks and praise for what I have. So,
yes, that's really helpful, especially hearing it in that order. And I hope everyone gets that too. That it's not the idea that we gotta get our act together. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not that God's saying, "Look, if you screw it up, Babylon's coming."
Yeah.
But no, exactly how you broke it down right there, which is, wow, all God wants for me, just believe that He is actually God.
Yeah.
Believe that I'm forgiven. Well, I mean, they don't require any work of me, but they are hard sometimes.
For sure. Yeah. Hard. Especially when the world's offering you free food,
Sure.
And going, you don't have to work for this. I'll just.
Yeah. And sometimes it's easier to have those tangibles and to say, look, it's right here, and I can hold it, and I can feel it, and touch it, and know, okay, yeah, I am this or that.
Yeah.
And in this trust in God, it's a little slower. It's a little more abstract, but this is just so reassuring to hear that, what God, He's not looking for me to be perfect.
No.
He's the one who's in charge of that anyway.
Yeah.
He's the one who is going to forgive me. He's the one who's going to wipe my slate clean.
Yeah.
And then the more I lean into belief in Him, trust in His forgiveness for me, the more I'm actually going to see myself change.
Yeah.
Not because I'm doing it.
Yep.
Because He's doing it.
Yeah.
And that just flips the world's message on its head.
For sure. For sure. And it puts you in a place of desire, actually desiring an obedient life, not out of fear of Him, but just out of, holy smokes, this is just a better way.
It works out.
It's just a better way.
Yeah. And I wonder, part of me wonders that this whole story of Daniel, of course it's true historically.
Yeah.
We believe that.
Not according to Wikipedia.
What?
Do not, it was, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but
please.
It was blatant in the first paragraph. All modern scholars agree that Daniel is just a myth. And then the categories are the tales of Daniel. It's hardcore blatant. So do not. Yeah,
modern historical critics have a lot to say about the Bible.
Are running rampant. Yeah,
they are. Okay. So, anyways,
yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's good to hear. Beware. But I was going to say, not only historically do we trust that, this actually happened. Also, I do think it is somewhat maybe typological, or it's a metaphor. It invites us to trust that narrative that Daniel and his buddies, they trusted in God.
Yep.
And they didn't just go along with what the world told them to do.
Right.
And things actually did work out.
Yep.
And even if we face suffering in this life, ultimately we know that's the same true story for us.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying, oh man, it's not that I'm following just because I'm afraid of the punishment. I'm following because God, you actually make this stuff work out.
Yeah.
And life is better.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on, but we've got, there's always next week for us to keep talking.
That's true. We're gonna be here for a while. Yeah.
But I did just want to say though too, I think one of the important things for us to know is that Daniel and his friends, they are not outright rebellious even rebelling against the world. They're not like trying to cause a revolt or a revolution.
Sure.
They're just saying, is it possible for us to remain faithful in this part of the world where, we don't have everything that we want or that we're used to. So I think that's important for us. And as the New Testament says, like we are in the world, but not of the world. Like, so we're not supposed to just like disassociate from the world, like go to work, live your life, participate in the community, do all of those things, being faithful to God while you're doing it, So, yeah, we could go on and on, Kevin, but that's good for today. You got any parting words?
No. Here's my parting words is, God is my judge.
Ooh, nice.
Daniel, baby.
Daniel, that's what Daniel means.
We're gonna look at God, and yeah, he's sovereign. He's sovereign today.
Cool.
We're interested in that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working through this, and I think it's gonna get crazy in like week 7 and 8 and stuff, where it's no longer just the narrative, but some crazy visions and stuff. But
yeah,
it'll be good. All right. Hey, blessings to all of you. Thanks for tuning in, listening. Feel free to share this word with other people. And again, our goal in doing this is just to model conversations. If you're having faith conversations, don't be intimidated by the depths that Kevin and I sometimes go to. Just find ways to incorporate little nuggets of this, little ideas of, God is in control. Like, just look around in your life and think, where is God in control? How can I talk to other people about that? Where can we have that conversation in our home? So, blessings to you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.